Well, and just to add that the reason that we're discussing it is because that particular video has got two people who claim to be Catholics, bringing that to a huge audience. I mean, it's got nearly 4 million views already. That video, and so I think that means these are the faces who seem to have the public traction and are bringing Catholicism into the limelight. So and they're controversial. Both people are controversial. So let's look at what the church teaches. Let's look at what's authentic in what they say and what's inauthentic in what they say.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
Mark Lambert, you and I have been watching podcasts.
A little bit of that, yes.
And we appear to have been watching one podcast that everybody else has been watching as well, which is a conversation between our own Piers Morgan and Chicago's own Nick Fuentes. So we're going to chat a little bit about that and talk a little bit about another podcast we've been watching, if you stay tuned. So where do we begin, Mr. Lambert?
Well, we've been talking about it a lot, haven't we? So we just thought we'd take this conversation to our channel, to our friends, our Catholic Unscripted friends, because I think there's quite a lot. Well, we seem to have a lot to say about a lot of the stuff. And I think the thing I particularly got into a conversation with Calvin Robinson on Twitter, which, I think seemed to be quite well received by people, which was to say that the most extraordinary part of the interview for me was when Piers Morgan suggested that you were an extremist if you believed everything that the church taught. And I know you, like, completely without any reference to that at all, you picked out exactly the same bit, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much of it that we could comment on. But that, I just thought, look at that. That is a huge problem. And we see it so often, don't we? It's cafeteria Catholicism. Piers proclaims, I'm a Catholic, unashamedly. I just think, how can he do that? And then say, but I don't agree with everything the church teaches. You don't have to do that. You can be a member of a religion and disagree with. And Fuentes, rightly, I felt, just said that lacks all credibility. He just sort of laughed at him and said, what's that about? And I think Piers really is of a type that's on the way out, if you can put it like that. I think his days are numbered. That cafeteria Catholicism, I'm Catholic in name only, but I want women priests, and I don't really agree with any of the teachings of the church. I mean, what's that about?
And that's really, it really hurts, doesn't it, when you hear someone with the reach. Like, one of the things that I felt was, I'm so glad that Piers Morgan feels that he's a Catholic, and I'm so glad that he's got the courage, with the huge audience that he's got, to publicly say, yes, I am a Catholic, they're really positive things. But then when he says something like that to Nick Fuentes, you just think, oh, goodness me, like, you really haven't got a clue, Piers, about any of it, have you? And my reaction really was that I just wish that I could have the opportunity to explain to Piers why he's wrong and why being a Catholic makes so much sense. The fact that he said that, like, the worst bit was that he said it makes you an extremist if you believe everything the Catholic Church teaches you. But he misunderstands, I think, what extremism is and what the Catholic Church proposes. Because extremism is when someone imposes their will and rejects reason or uses a kind of coercion. But the Catholic Church, by contrast, it asks the believer to freely assent to truths that, if the church is who she claims to be, so if you're a Catholic, you're fundamentally, surely, saying that you believe that the church is who she claims to be. Those claims then are revelation from God himself. So it's the secret code about life, isn't it? It's the the really important message of how we should really be living. And that's tried and tested through the centuries, so that those of us who live according to those rules, you know, me and you, certainly, we say, yes, this is the best way to live your life. So even if you suspect a little bit that the church might be true, then its teachings aren't arbitrary rules or cultural preferences. They're revelations, surely, about reality, the human person, and what our purpose on this planet is. So to accept them then can't be a form of extremism. Instead, it's integrity, isn't it? That's the bit that gets me. Is like, if you say I'm a Catholic, and you know, to be a Catholic with integrity is to believe what the church teaches and to challenge the culture because of those beliefs. It's a willingness to align your life with what you believe to be true, even when it challenges you or contradicts the zeitgeist. Rejecting those teachings, on the other hand, especially selectively based on what you personally believe to be true, just means that rejecting what God's own guidance for human flourishing is. So I think that believing the Catholic faith isn't fanaticism at all. It's coherence. It's quite the opposite. It's the courage to trust that if God speaks truly through his church, then his revelation is wiser than the shifting preferences of the secular zeitgeist, and particularly of celebrity commentators.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. You said, I wish I had a chance to you know, rebut what Piers Morgan is saying, and this is your chance. This is what you know, fortunately we're able to do that, and not directly to Piers, but you know, you never know, he might watch Catholic Unscripted. Hello Piers, terrible interview. But I think that what makes me so annoyed about that is it's worse because of the veneer of Catholicism. And this is like Catholic schools. We complain about Catholic schools and say many faithful Catholics are choosing to send their children to non-Catholic schools because they say, oh, you heard this in school? Well, they're not Catholic. So, you know, that's what they believe. We know this is not what we believe. And there is not that tension. Whereas when you send your child into a school that claims to be Catholic, that then fills their head full of DIE nonsense, contrary to the teachings of the faith, it then becomes very difficult to say, oh, well, they're Catholic and we're Catholic, and what does Catholicism mean? So I think that's, I know what you're saying. On the one hand, it's good to have someone publicly in the public eye with a high profile saying I'm a Catholic, but if they're only going to say that in name only and then say, but I question everything the church teaches, there's no integrity there. So
that's what I mean. It's like the school. It's, you know, this is a brilliant parallel that you haven't mentioned before, like schools, isn't it? Because Catholic schools give us this amazing opportunity to reach people with the truth, you know, and to say, look, and like we've said before, and I will repeat ad infinitum, I wish some bishops were listening to what we've got to say, you know, that this is our opportunity. Catholic schools are our opportunity to change the world, to change the culture and change society. And we're failing miserably. That can be seen by retention rates of the age groups who go to Catholic schools. And that's not just in the UK, that's the same thing in the US, throughout the developed world. You know, we could learn something from Africa and from the developing countries. So I think that is an absolutely brilliant point. And again, I completely agree that Piers is such a familiar Catholic, isn't he? You know, the sort of person that we all know. There are so many people like that. And, you know, he's saying, well, I'm a reasonable person, you know, and it's reasonable to dissent. It's reasonable. And that, I always struggle with that, Katherine. So, like,
but that's one thing it's not.
It's reasonable, you know, like it comes across as being reasonable. And even there are members of my family who say that I'm a radical or an extremist, you know. So, simply because I don't agree with abortion or divorce or contraception or any of these things, that makes you a radical. But like, we believe those things because those things are the best way to live your life, and you can see the damage that these things have done and continue to do in other people's lives, can't you? And so why is it extremism to reject that damage and to say, I'm not gonna allow that to infect my family? You know, I'm going to say no to that. And it's difficult sometimes, but that's what we're going to do.
No, it's not extremism, and in the pejorative way that Piers Morgan said it was. And the lack of integrity is shown that in every other walk of life, Piers Morgan would recognise this. You know, in sport, in something as trivial as sport, if you said, "I support Arsenal football team, but I think it's fine if the players also play for Manchester United, or if they mix boys and girls in the same team, or if they decide to play ping pong halfway through, or if the goalkeeper goes out to have a cup of tea in the middle of a game." Like, in other words, if you take the rules of football and change them and say, "I like football, but I don't agree with any of the rules," he would immediately acknowledge it's incoherent. Yeah, it's like, that's an incoherent position. You can't say, you know, I believe in this thing, I place myself under this, but I reject everything it teaches. So it's just, when it comes to religion, he just has, unfortunately, this very common attitude, which is, I can say I'm a member of this religion, but reject what it teaches. And the sad thing is, in doing that, he probably thinks this makes him popular. It's just so sad, because it's so beautiful. It's totally true. It's wholly good. And so all you're rejecting is truth, goodness, and beauty. And the opposites of that then come your way: ugliness, unhappiness, lies, deceit, and badness. And I wouldn't want that for Piers. I wouldn't want that for anyone. So he shouldn't be encouraged. No Catholic should be encouraged to take that view. And it's one that we hear very often. I heard my own MP here in Morden, Siobhan McDonough, being interviewed a few years ago, doing the same thing, talking about her Catholic faith. And when asked, she said, "Oh, but I'm not an extremist. I don't, you know, I'm pro-choice." And you just think,
don't go to mass or anything like that.
Yeah.
Absolute madness. But I think the other part of the problem with this equation, and you might disagree with me on this bit, is that Nick Fuentes, or you might agree with me, but Nick Fuentes doesn't particularly give. He's not particularly, you know, appealing, or he doesn't give particularly a good witness to the faith himself, does he? He's quite a controversial figure for a number of reasons.
I don't disagree with you. Let's let it be said at the beginning, because this is important. I think not you, and I know not me. I don't follow Nick Fuentes. I don't sit watching his videos. I know who he is.
Never even heard of him up until very
I do know
recently,
who he is.
when you mentioned it to me. Yeah,
he's mentioned very often, and I do know who he is. And our friend Anthony Abate at Avoiding Babylon was posting lots of clips saying this is hilarious, and a lot of other people had mentioned it. I don't follow him. I don't subscribe to any channel that he has, and I don't, incidentally, follow Piers Morgan either. I've seen him. He's been around on TV for donkey's years. I know who he is, and I've seen him chat to people over the years, but he's not someone I'd seek out. So these are two people who we're not following closely, don't know especially their political views or anything else. So let's say pretty much we're taking this as we find it, this interview, as I suppose many people will have done. And I in answer to your point there, yeah, Nick Fuentes does identify himself also as a Catholic, and I would say he strikes me as a clever young man, but lacks wisdom and prudence. And he can be very clever. He's coarse. He uses foul language. I don't like any of that. And he has a sense of humour that tends towards the sort of shock jock kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that everything he says is false, or that he doesn't make some good points. He's a young man, and I'd like to see a bit more wisdom, which may come over the years. But we're going to get to the women stuff later on. But let's start with, there was quite a prolonged section to the conversation around race. So
well, and just to add that the reason that we're discussing it is because that particular video has got two people who claim to be Catholics, bringing that to a huge audience. I mean, it's got nearly 4 million views already, that video. And so I think that means, you know, these are the faces who seem to have the public traction and are bringing Catholicism into the limelight. So and they're controversial. Both people are controversial. So let's look at what the church teaches. Let's look at what's authentic in what they say and what's inauthentic in what they say.
Yeah. So we're going to pull up just a few clips, and we'll start with one where Piers Morgan has taken some of Nick Fuentes' words on his channel and basically confronted him and said, look, this suggests to me that you're racist. Are you racist? And I have to say, refreshingly, Nick Fuentes sort of goes, yeah. Now, you might say, why is it refreshing to say you're racist? I think it's not so much that it's refreshing to say you're racist. The point is, Piers Morgan seemed to be very keen to throw labels at him. You're racist, you're misogynist, you're anti-Semitic. And what I saw with Nick Fuentes was somebody who just said, I don't fear these labels. I'm done with
what's
this.
interesting is
I don't fear. And
and
once you allow people to hold those labels over you and have you trembling in fear, they have power over you. So what I'm saying is, I liked the way he didn't try to rabidly defend himself and make excuses for himself. He just said, if that's what you think I am, I'll take that label if you want to label me. But he wasn't interested in the terms that Piers was using. So go on, you were saying, yeah.
Well, yeah, so Piers is the sort of person who gets labelled with the similar sort of labels himself. So he's like a less extreme sort of version of Nick Fuentes. But like the reason that you're saying it's refreshing for him to say that is not because you would in any way condone racism. I know you very, very well, and neither of us, God forbid, quite the opposite, as we have discussed on numerous occasions. But, you know, when you look at the way that secular culture is going, you've got this extraordinary situation where, you know, say like in mainstream TV, like let's take, for example, Lord of the Rings would be a really good example, where they've race swapped people. You know, they swap in people, make them diverse, and all this sort of thing to great cost to the narrative quite often in an attempt to sort of race wash it or whatever. So this is the sort of stuff that's going on. And if you say, hang on a minute, there weren't any African Americans in the court of Queen Elizabeth II or whatever.
Anne Boleyn was not black. Yeah.
You're called a racist. You're a racist. Oh no, quickly, you're a racist. And that's really what we're saying. Oh, give me a break. Like a racist is someone who hates other people because of their race, because of and when that's, nothing could be further than the truth. And it becomes dangerous when these people control the language, as Piers does, like you say, by throwing labels at Nick Fuentes instead of talking about the actual subject matter, because it's, Nick Fuentes in this discussion. I mean, I am, like Katherine and I have been talking about this all day on and off, and I really have not got a lot of time for him at all, because I don't think he carries himself, in a Catholic way at all. But he has got an audience. So it's worth commenting on. And I think that it also aligns itself with this direction of travel that a lot of young people and a lot of young Catholics are going in, where they're just fed up with all this nonsense. And that really is what Nick says in this clip, isn't it? He says, I don't care really what you think. I'm beyond it. And if you want to think that and go down that route of like the secular mainstream, then whatever, I can't stop you from calling me that. And we've had a little bit of that, haven't we, me and you, in the past? And so we know what that's like. And you have very wisely always said, what's the point in even responding? If people want to denigrate you for something that you aren't or you haven't done, then there's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah, I just think my view is to make right with God. God knows me. God knows my heart, my soul, my intentions, my motivations, my actions. I take what I'm ashamed of to confession, as we all should, leave it at God's feet and ask for the grace to try not to sin again. And what more, outside of that, we can spend our lives in this battle, and it's online. We can spend our lives in a public, online, tit for tat, mudslinging, and where does it get anyone? It doesn't get anyone anywhere. So I figure, it's totally small scale compared to Nick Fuentes' audience, but if people want to call me names because of things I say or people I speak to or beliefs I hold, if they know them at all, if they know them in depth, then and it's online, it's an online insult, I just think
Ignore
don't fuel the fire by getting into a dispute. Just let it pass.
The other
Pray for
caveat,
people.
I'd say, like, why I've got a problem perhaps with Nick and the way that he presents himself is because he's representing the Catholic Church, and I do feel that, you know, it's that sweetness of Christ is a beautiful thing. When you meet someone who's holy, who's living the life, and a lot of these people seem to be using Christianity or using Catholicism as a counter to the culture. And we've often spoken about or alluded to that lack of a metaphysical dimension, a supernatural dimension to their faith. So it becomes just like a form of utilitarianism where they're using the faith, in order, and they're, so they're going down like these young guys, if you don't know, a lot of them are going down the gym, they treat women badly, and that's sort of, they somehow justify it by being a Christian. And this is really troubling, There's Sarah Ward, who writes for us, was thinking about doing it. She had some really good ideas for an article on this, because as a mother, she's experienced it herself. And I know you have as well, Katherine, haven't you? So,
I think
that's a dimension.
No,
that's an interesting dimension to it. So I'm just trying to set it up so that our audience, who, I don't know how many of you are familiar with these characters, but there you go. So should we play the first clip?
I was just going to say that's a really great point, and we'll come to introduce you to Nick and Piers in a moment. But I think the point you make there, that often Nick appears to seek natural ends. Like there's a clip where he says, blacks should be in prison, women should shut up, and Jews should, and it's okay, it's blunt and it's coarse language. And even if you then tease that out and say what truth, if any, is there in there, it's a blunt instrument that ultimately is a supernatural end. That ultimately is, he's talking about natural, like a natural solution, and it's not a natural solution we need. So you're quite right to point to that though he is obviously saying things that appeal to an audience of young men, if it doesn't bring them to the truth in its fullness, then it's actually can be more harm than good.
That's the concern.
Bring him up. Let's
go.
White people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no, I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. You look at the BLM movement, they said that the reason that black people, are violent, or the reason there's crime, is because of police brutality, or redlining, or all these other things. They said we need to get rid of the police. We need to defund them. And a lot of cities did. A lot of cities like Chicago, for example, the police changed the rules of engagement. They don't chase them. It's not a felony if you steal a certain amount of merchandise. They won't chase them on foot. And now the city's totally up for grabs. And now, whether you're in the Gold Coast or whether you're on the Mag Mile or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot, you might get mugged, someone might run up on you. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person, and get stabbed, mugged, whatever. And by the way, this is a strategy. They call it the friendly stranger. There's a crew of them. They do this in Chicago. They stand outside bars. black people. They approach strangers. It's a robbery crew, and they pretend to be a friendly stranger, and then they mug them. And stupid white people say, "Oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you." You know, they grin, they laugh, they put up with the nonsense, and then they get mugged, or worse. Sometimes they get executed. And
Out
so
of
as a white
interest,
person,
how do you feel about mass shootings at school?
It completely changes. He completely changes the topic there rather than actually go into that, doesn't he, Piers?
Yeah, I mean, now you know that I have some comment to make on this, which I think Nick Fuentes is, in his own words, giving a view that has been espoused by Thomas Sowell, a black economist, when he writes about this in his book Discrimination and Disparities. And I think it's very much that position that he's espousing. But like I've said before, the way it's delivered, it's in a blunt way, and Piers Morgan is horrified by it, and is desperate to try and belittle what he's saying in a dishonest way, I think, I have to say. What did you think of that?
Well, I think so that there's some common, like what Nick Fuentes is saying is, like it really, the first bit of that clip really makes you go, oh my goodness me. I really thought it was outrageous. I think that the trouble is that he uses pejorative language. The terms he uses are often derogatory. And I think that there's a real danger in implying inherent criminality. He's also very bellicose. He's aggressive and confrontational. He sort of raises his voice and accuses Morgan of ambushing him and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think I do like so. It's where you live, isn't it? Is how you behave. So
Yeah,
you're reacting to an
you
environment.
have to remember. You have
Yeah.
to remember that Nick Fuentes lives in Chicago, and America itself as a whole has a very different history of race relations
Well,
than ours in the UK. So that has to be understood in terms of the context that he's talking about. Sorry, go on.
well, no, that's exactly it. So I'm just very uncomfortable with any sort of any direction of travel that says that because of a person's race or whatever, then you categorize them in a certain way. But like when we were talking earlier, if I was walking through South London and there was a group of black youths standing on the corner, as there often is, I would cross the other side of the street and keep, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be engaged. I don't want to have to be involved in an altercation. And those are the kinds of situations where you find yourself, especially as someone who trained martial arts for a long while and who's been, I have been in a few altercations, and this is, you recognize you can almost smell the testosterone in the air, or when they're when boys are geeing each other up to go and have a go at someone. And as a big bloke, as someone who's 6'4", you might think that's a protection, but actually in confrontational situations, what you usually find is if someone wants to have a go, and if they're a regular troublemaker, they tend to go for the biggest bloke in the room to try and prove the point.
Yeah, I want a couple of things. First of all, I actually don't think Nick Fuentes did accuse Piers Morgan of ambushing him. I think he said everything that came his way he expected. And I'm not saying he doesn't use derogatory terms, but I'd be interested to know what derogatory terms he used in that clip, because I don't think just saying black person, we can be told that's a derogatory term. Otherwise we can't communicate. It gets ridiculous. What I find very interesting is two things. I want to say about,
like black fair and stuff, like
I didn't hear that in the clip, but yeah, I'm not saying he did. I'm not saying he doesn't use terms that are offensive, but I don't want to just. I want to be cautious, because we're trying to judge well, we're trying to be prudent, we're trying to be reasonable. We're trying to bring light, and so I don't just want to go in like he's a baddie. People are complex. Well, listen. What's interesting is this. Now, again, this is going back to Thomas Sowell, and this I think was in Black Rednecks and White Liberals, which is one of his books. And I'll have to, ad lib here because I haven't got it in front of me. But he says that the culture that we associate with black culture now, let's say in Britain, is actually what he calls a cracker culture, which came from Northern Britain, like the worst of the like Northern Ireland, what we'd call now Northern Ireland, Scotland, who went over to the antebellum South and then were really a rough lot. Yeah, really rough, cursing and crude in their behaviour and their language. And then the period of slave ownership, that behaviour then was picked up and passed on through that, like from this cracker culture. So his point is, and remember, this is before I get letters in, this is saying, oh, you know, you're a big racist. He says the thing that people are defending and saying, no, you can't, this is black culture. I think it must be insulting to so many black people. It just must be. Yeah, because first of all, how is having your trousers halfway down your legs and your pants, you know, another some way down your legs and a balaclava on, and how is that to say that's black culture? It's just insulting. And so I think that this kind of culture, this rap culture, this rude culture, this kissing your teeth culture, this that has come to be associated with black people. I'm talking about the UK. I don't know, especially in America now. But is, if we say that is largely adopted from what is essentially a rough north of Britain white culture, it suddenly seems a bit odd to be saying, you know, we have to do, because I've been in schools. Remember, Mark, I've been in schools. I was in schools during the BLM, George Floyd stuff. And I can tell you now, and this is people's lives. This is why I'm so animated about it. I see what it does to young people. I worked in London schools with the majority, over 50% black population. And I saw young boys being fed lines about being oppressed by the white man, being told, don't pick girls up who are, you know, skirts hitched up and like talking loudly and aggressively or kissing their teeth. And that's their culture. That's their culture. It was almost like you're sending young people out to their deaths on the streets. And by the way, this is actually the case. I'm not going to name names, but within 5 years, I know 3 kids. 2 ended up in remand institutions in knife crime, and 1 is a paraplegic young black kid because he went out with that attitude, trousers around his knees and kissing his teeth and acting all like, you know, that I got a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah. And
to the wrong people, and he got so badly attacked that he's actually worse than dead. He's alive, but under 18. This is horrific, because he's being fed these lies,
right?
That if you pick up on the and say, your skirt should be a proper length, do your top button up, say hello and goodbye and thank you.
You're racist.
You're being racist because somehow, but that's racist because it's saying because of your race, because of your colour, somehow
you can't say
you have lower expectations, and I think that's outrageous.
Totally. Well, and like I was going to say, the other thing is that it's part of this modern secular culture that says you're allowed to behave however you want to behave. It's about your feelings or something. And there's not a proper way to behave and an improper way to behave. And that is contrary to what the Catholic Church holds and believes to be true, isn't it? You know, and I think Fuentes is right on some issues, but it's wrapped up in lots of horrible stuff as well. But the issues that he brings to the fore, like the crisis of fatherhood, the harms of radical individualism, the need for accountability in crime-ridden communities, they all align with Catholic social teaching on subsidiarity and the common good and stuff like that. But you've got to, you know, I have to reject this racial essentialism. I think problems like urban violence are rooted in socio-economic factors, broken families, and in sin. It's not inherently race. And what you're pointing out is where that gets all blurred, isn't it? If you start saying, "Oh no, you're racist," if you correct bad behaviour, then that's where we get all these problems from. So we have to be able to assert Catholic truth about and that's at the schools are the forefront of that fight. And I think that we have to ground that discussion then in human dignity, which is obviously at the basis of what the church teaches.
Yeah, absolutely. If you'll indulge me, because I said I'd turn to the words of Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell writes in Discrimination and Disparities, and this, I think, is a fuller, more detailed, let's say, exposition of what I think Nick Fuentes was talking about costs, which Piers just, I think, took to be racist diatribe. So this is from Thomas Sowell. People talk of discriminating tastes, for example, being a wine connoisseur, knowing each and making a judgment about which is better. Marriage, for example, involves discrimination. Whether differences in quality have been correctly discerned by others, or whether a choice is made by personal aversions or arbitrary assumptions, is ultimately an empirical question, even if it evokes strong emotions. We need to be clear about the words we use in asking the questions. At a minimum, we need to know what we mean when we use the word discrimination. The broader meaning, the ability to discern differences in the qualities of people and things, and choosing accordingly, can be called, this is what Thomas Sowell calls discrimination one, making fact-based distinctions. So I meet you and I meet Bob, and I judge you and Bob based on knowing you. That's discrimination one. The narrower but more commonly used meaning, treating people negatively based on arbitrary aversions or assumptions concerning individuals of a particular race, can be called discrimination two, the kind that has led to anti-discrimination laws and policies. He says, ideally, discrimination one, applied to people, would mean judging each person as an individual, regardless of what group they're part of. But here the ideal is seldom found among human beings in the real world, even among humans who espouse that ideal. If you are walking at night, this goes to your point, if you are walking at night down a lonely street and see up ahead a shadowy figure in the alleyway, do you judge that person as an individual, or do you judge that person and cross to the other side? The figure might be a kindly old neighbour walking his dog, but when making such a decision, a mistake on your part could be costly, up to and including costing you your life. In other contexts, you may in fact judge each person as an individual, but that this depends on context means that people have already been implicitly pre-sorted by the context, and only after that pre-sorting are they then judged as individuals. For example, a professor entering a classroom may judge each new student as an individual, but the same professor walking on the street at night may not judge the same student as an individual. The students in a college class are not likely to be a random sample of the full range of variations found in the general population, and are more likely to represent a narrower range of people assembled there for a narrower range of purposes and with a narrower range of individual characteristics, as well as being in a setting less dangerous than a dark street at night. In short, one of the differences between the applicability of discrimination 1 and 2 is cost, and this is not always a small cost, nor is it a cost measured solely in money. Everyone might agree that discrimination 1 is preferable, judging things on an individual basis, other things being equal, because it means making decisions based on demonstrable realities. Nevertheless, one may still be aware that other things are not always equal, and sometimes other things are very far from being equal. Where there is a difference in costs when showing between discrimination 1 and discrimination 2, much may depend on how high those costs are, and especially on who pays the costs. People who would never walk through a particular neighbourhood at night, or perhaps not even in broad daylight, would nevertheless be indignant at banks who put a whole neighbourhood off limits as a place to invest their depositors' money. Another way of making decisions is about weighing empirical evidence about groups as a whole, or about the interactions of different groups with one another. Now, this, I think, gets to Fuentes' point. This is still discrimination 1, basing decisions on empirical evidence, but the distinction between the ideal version of discrimination 1, which is judging each individual as an individual, and making decisions based on empirical evidence about the group to which the individual belongs, is a consequential difference. We can call the ideal version, basing decisions about evidence on individuals, discrimination 1A, and the less than ideal version, basing individual decisions on group evidence, discrimination 1B. But both are different from discrimination 2, which is making decisions based on unsubstantiated notions or animosities. Last little bit here. Here's an example for the sake of illustration. If 40% of the people in group X are alcoholics and 1% of the people in group Y are alcoholics, An employer may well prefer to hire only people from Group Y for work where an alcoholic would not only be ineffective, but dangerous. This would mean that a majority of the people in Group X, 60% in this case, would be denied employment even though they're not alcoholics. What matters to the employer is the cost of determining which individual is or is not an alcoholic when job applicants all show up sober in the day that they're being interviewed for employment. This also matters to the customers who buy the employer's products and to society as a whole. If alcoholics produce a higher proportion of products that turn out to be defective, that is a cost to customers, and that cost may take different forms, e.g. the customer could buy a defective product, or defects in the product might be discovered in the factory and discarded. In this case, the customer will be charged higher prices for the products that are sold, since the cost of defective products must be covered by the prices of reliable products. In other words, there are serious costs. This is not discrimination to decisions made on personal bias, antipathy, or animosity towards a group. A real-life example is this. Employers who automatically did criminal background checks on all potential employees, discrimination 1A, had a more diverse workforce and employed more young black males than did employers who refused to do background checks because they considered them to be racist. Where the nature of the work made criminal background checks worth the cost for all employees, it was no longer necessary to use group information to assess whether individual young black job applicants had a criminal background. This made young black job applicants without a criminal background more, not less, more employable than before. Yet many observers hoping to help young black males have more employment, yet many observers hoping to help young black males have more employment opportunities have advocated prohibiting employers from doing criminal background checks. Moreover, the US Equal Opportunities Commission has sued employers who do criminal background checks on job applicants on the grounds that it's racially discriminatory, even when it was employed to all job applicants regardless of race. Empirically, however, these background checks provided more employment opportunities for young black males. What that does, it's a lengthy it's a chapter from his book, or small section of a chapter, but what it does is it shows it's more complicated than this. You know, it's not that simple. That it's not just a case of saying you're a racist, you're discriminatory. It's the law of unintended consequences. And I think what Nick was trying to get at, and goes on to try and get at with Piers further still, is he's trying to say, we have to have real world conversations about the costs for me, for my children. It doesn't mean I think every black person I walk past, or every woman or every Jew or whoever he's talking about is X, but it does mean that we have to live in the world, and the world is a very different place now than the world it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, with different problems.
Yeah, and we deserve a more nuanced and intelligent conversation, don't we? You know, it's that as that quote from Thomas Sowell points out beautifully, it's when we use these group things to sort of throw everyone in broad categories that we really end up in trouble. So please God, we can have a nuanced, intelligent discussion and not rely on tropes or any of these. That's real racism, isn't it? That's really what racism is all about. Should we go on and play them? Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the issue is supremacism. And at one point he says, "Oh, you're a white supremacist." What does racism mean? If Nick Fuentes thinks that because of his colour of his skin, the pigmentation of his skin, he is superior to another person who's got a darker skin, that's insane. And that should be called out, and that's abhorrent, and that's unchristian. But I think it seemed to me that what Nick Fuentes was doing was just rejecting that, you know, just saying, label me what you want, if this is what you think it is, but it's not really. It's not sufficient anymore. It's just not sufficient anymore to go around saying you're this, you're that, you're that. And I think that, yes, the coarseness and everything else, but I think that's refreshing, and it does speak to how younger people are. They're fed up of it. They're fed up of it being used to shut them up.
And if you watch, I think the great measure of this is what's been going on in Hollywood, you know, where we've got, filmmakers have been bringing out all this stuff, and you can see what they're trying to inject into the culture through that medium more than any other, I think. and the way that now they reckon this is the worst year ever for Hollywood, you know, that it's going to, that everything, like, is it MGM or one of the big houses has just been bought by Netflix, and the whole thing's crashing and burning. And the reason is because they're engaging in all this stuff. So it's a real phenomenon that's going on in our culture. They're trying to impress these ideas on the young people. And Nick Fuentes is an example of the young people going, we're just not buying it. You know, it's not happening. It's nonsense. And they need a little bit of light. They need a little bit of Catholic light and a bit of honey to, you know, and a bit of wisdom perhaps to bring it round. But like, it doesn't mean that everything he's saying, even though some things he says are quite shocking. Right.
Let's go.
So what's the next one? Is it free? Is it this one? This one.
Bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
So what do you think Piers is trying to do with this?
Yeah, so we can play a bit more of this, but this I felt was transparent. This is interesting. Piers has decided that from what he said in that previous clip, he's a racist. He's asked him if he is, and he said yes. So he says you're a racist, and now he's trying to show that white people commit crime at exactly the same rates as black people. But it's disingenuous. I mean, I'm sorry, it is just disingenuous. And the thing is, Nick Fuentes knows that people watching are going to be making conclusions based on their real life experience. And Piers tries to do dodgy statistics. And listen to this, because this is quite interesting in terms of Morgan's approach.
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
what proportion?
I'm curious. I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in these schools.
Is my mic working?
What proportion? Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60-65% of school shootings by white people.
It's quite hard to keep up with it because they're just trading statistics, aren't they?
Yeah, it is sort of hard to keep up, and it seems like they're just trading insults or disagreements. But you can see what's happening here. Nick Fuentes is saying, yes, maybe 90% of mass shootings in schools are done by white people, but how many, what proportion of the white population commits these crimes? Whereas Piers Morgan is saying 90% of these crimes are committed by white people. That's a different point, but he's making the point to try and equalize, to make this constant leveling. You know, he goes on later to talk about women and say, I think women should have equal rights. And I think this is disingenuous, because it's like when we try to talk about, what do you call it, when you try and talk homosexual people out of leading a homosexual lifestyle.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Conversion therapy. It's like you can't do conversion therapy because 90% of people will kill themselves, you know, and it's fear tactics. It's 90% of people who are trans will to commit suicide if you try and tell, when actually it's not that. 80 or 85% of people who say they're trans, if they're left without puberty blockers and left to just develop naturally, will probably resolve that crisis, and some will end up being homosexual, having same-sex attraction, which they manage throughout their lives, but without the mutilation of surgery. But we're thrown these, statistics are used to try and to try and
manipulate the result.
Manipulate. It's like my favourite is most people have more than the average number of legs. Which is kind of, it's, of course they do, because it only takes one person to have one leg, and suddenly everyone with two legs has more than the, it's just, but it's how you and when I used to do exam reviews in education, you'd have a load of kids do exams, and then you'd have to do a review, and you'd be desperately trying to find a way to make the statistics look like the kids did much better than they may actually have done. What sounds better? And this is what I think Piers is trying to do, and Nick Fuentes is simply saying you're doing this to avoid dealing with a different question, and that's an uncomfortable question. Maybe it's a question about how multiculturalism works. Or
I did a little bit of digging on it, and it's really uncomfortable. Like, the answers are really uncomfortable. I mean, one of them is that white people have greater access to guns than black people, and the black people who do have access to guns are more likely to have dropped out of school. So, that gun violence in black communities takes place in a different environment. And also, I mean, just you can look this up online. I'm not making it up, but black Americans suffer disproportionately from gun violence, from gun homicides. Like, for example, 54% of victims of gun homicides in the US are black, and that's despite the fact that they make up only 13% of the population. I mean, that's quite a shocking disparity, isn't it?
Yeah, this I think is something that does need to be discussed. And I know a lot of black people who say they want to have this discussion. They want to, especially in the US where we have got gun crime.
So in order to
address it, it's actually a lot of victims of gun crime are the black community. Such as it is, whatever you want to call, it's black people. They're the ones who are suffering disproportionately, and they want to be able to address it. But if you just say there is no problem here because you're worried about accusations of racism, then you can't address the problem. You're letting people down. You're letting people down.
Right, here we go. We carry on.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
What difference does that make to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is in terms
what I'm saying to you is, by your logic, if we now have agreed.
Of course, the irony is that Piers, the black people that Piers comes into contact with are smart, educated. He's not in the dodgy end of Chicago, is he? Like, he's never done a drug deal in his life or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's a point that Nick Fuentes makes, and he says, I'll bring you to Chicago. And then Piers says, my son studied in Chicago for a year, and he says that's a bubble, So it was very interesting to watch. But let's finish this. Let's just finish this little bit.
The vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people, and predominantly young white men. Then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb, or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because you're, well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart, actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago.
Piers is monkeying around with statistics there. So it's just, it didn't seem like as fruitful as it might be, because it just felt like each person was going in and wasn't going to budge at all from
Well, it's
the position
terrible
there.
reasoning from Piers, though, to say
Yeah.
basically, you know, oh, this proves you're a racist because you're going to say avoid, you know, like, because you're not going to say avoid white people because I mean, it was just like obviously problematic line of argumentation, wasn't it? You know, it's like like in reality he acknowledges all the statistics being against that line of argumentation, but he puts it forward anyway because he sort of feels trapped, like he has to do that in order to prove. I don't know. It's really not very good at all.
No, and that's why I wanted to read. I know it was lengthy, but I really wanted to read that long section from Sol's book, because I think it addressed some of the issues and the reality of how we have to manage that, and we do have to manage it, and the costs that lie, that, you know, not just monetary costs, but cost to our lives, cost to our children's lives. It doesn't mean we have to conclude that every X person or Y person or Z person is you know, a horrible danger, but it does mean that we have to be prudent and realistic in a world that has broken down borders, that has said you should be ashamed of your nationality, that has imposed a multiculturalism on us that is simply not working. And again, we can't say it's not working. Why? Because we fear the labels again. And we talk about this often with Islam. You know, does it mean every Muslim? You've got Muslim friends, I've got Muslim friends. Does it mean every Muslim? I know a number of peaceful Muslims. Of course, it doesn't mean every Muslim. But it's like why? So if you think about it, we say Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, but when we say that, we don't mean every Japanese person was responsible for bombing Pearl Harbor. We're happy to say Germany bombed London during the Blitz, but that doesn't mean every German person was responsible. But when we make some statements, we're told you can't say that. You can't say that. But the thing is, in those particular instances I've said, the Germans and the Japanese carried out those acts nominally on the behalf of those people. Now, those people are then free to say, not in my name, you know, not in my name. I disagree with this. But I think we have to be able to just have a conversation. We have to be able to talk in terms where we're not told as soon as a word comes out of our mouth, you can't say that. You can't say that. A friend of mine working in the NHS was trying to get through a really serious safeguarding meeting. She couldn't get through the information that was required. This is people's lives because she'd been told she'd misgendered someone. You know, no, they're a they. It's not a she, it's a they. And you just think, are you really going to stop me at this point when there's somebody who's in danger because you think that I've used the wrong pronoun? So it becomes sclerotic. You know, it becomes so sclerotic that you wonder if that's the intention. Don't talk about it. And we have to be able to, because people matter, the dignity of the human person. And that means having difficult conversations.
It shows that the only thing that works is the church, you know, to sacramentalize this and the dignity of the human person, that the approach that the Catholic Church has got to this is the right approach. And what the secular approach is a disaster, isn't it?
Disaster.
You know.
It's a disaster, because it's like, here we are, they're talking about black people and white people. I don't know about you, the Catholic schools are the most diverse up and down the country. My church is a traditional parish full of people of all different, you know, races, black people, Indian people, white people. I don't know the numbers, but I don't really care, you know, because we're all there bowing down and worshipping our Lord, rightly ordered. I care if people are Christian. I'll be honest with you. I don't care about immigration if we've got a load of Catholics coming in and worshipping our Lord. And but we're only under Christ can that diversity be held in unity, in that idea, in that perfect way, rightly ordered. When we try to do it ourselves, we fail. We just fail.
Should we go and do the next one? Is it about women?
Right. So this is our last one, I think, and we mentioned this right at the beginning. So let's just click now. This time this is about the church and women priests.
Not interacting with what I'm saying. Why can't women be priests?
They should be.
Okay, well, you're not Catholic. That's not a Catholic position.
I am a Catholic. I just many things.
I'd love to know why Piers thinks that, wouldn't you? Because like he's not watching what's going on, is he? Let alone like no theological proper understanding or ontology or anthropology or anything at all. Just the fact that what a failure that's been for the Church of England, where obviously Piers lives. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure I do know why. I'm pretty sure I do know why Piers thinks that. It's because he's absolutely swallowed hook, line, and sinker the equality narrative, the rights narrative. It's unfair, it's unjust, according to worldly terms. It's to flatten everything, to flatten the hierarchy. You don't have man under God, woman under man. You don't have any of that. It's all gone. And so therefore, once you flattened everything, it's just not fair. But it's not Catholic.
Well, that kind of is contrary, because the whole basis of being Catholic is accepting. It's accepting the authority of the pontiff.
You can be a member of a religion and disagree with parts of that religion. Perfectly reasonable.
You could be, well, yeah. I mean, you could say
unless you're
that,
an extremist.
But it wouldn't be true.
If you're an extremist, you can't.
Okay.
Obviously, you never deviate.
That's just not rigorous.
You never
That's
deviate
just
if you're an extremist. But even the Constitution's been amended. Was it 27 times? People talk about this sacrosanct document. It's been amended 27 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my, this is not rigorous.
And he's comparing divine revelation with human politics, isn't he? So it sort of misses the whole point of what the church is.
Yeah.
Intellectually, this is very
just a statement of fact.
Theology. Okay. But it's fine. Where were we? We're talking about Trump, and somehow we got into
Trump.
You're white knighting for women's rights.
On Trump, well, I think women should have the same rights as you and I. You don't. That's fine.
Put on the pink hat, bro. Put on the pink hat. We're waiting.
What's the pink hat for?
Okay, we can
for the march.
Do you think Piers doesn't know what the pink hat is for?
Well, I don't know what the pink hat is for.
Right.
To be honest. Okay. Yeah, I know now because Nick says it's for a women's march, but I didn't know that.
Should we take that down at that point?
Yeah, we can take that. Yeah, so that's the Piers on women,
which we kind of did in women priests. Yeah. So
yeah, I would just say on that.
Yeah,
I would just say briefly on that Piers is doing that classic thing of saying, it's that like I just said, that modern idea of rights. I was talking to a graduate from Oxford, which has always been number one in the world for classics, and it's losing that place now. And the reason it's losing that place is because it says you're looking now in the classics department at Oxford, used to be the greatest, the best in the whole world. They teach classics through a modern lens. So in the ancient world, failing to recognize women as women and failing to create the conditions in which they could flourish as women was what misogyny was. Whereas today, misogyny is failing to create conditions in which women can thrive as men. So you're looking at the classical world through a modern lens. And this is what Piers is doing here. And this is what I think Taylor Marshall was saying in our conversation. He said, you can look, I don't know if it was Taylor, but someone was saying recently we spoke to, you can look at things either the tradition of the church and look at a modern thing through the eyes of the tradition of the church, or you can look at something now and judge the church backwards that way from the modern perspective. And that's what Piers is doing. And it is disingenuous and it is intellectually weak and not rigorous. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so then we're going to take this. This was discussed by our friends at Avoiding Babylon with Tim Gordon.
Yeah. So then, so some of what Fuentes and Morgan were talking about here was, we didn't get onto it too much, but a little bit about misogyny, women, and Tim Gordon has just produced a film called not What Is a Woman, which is what Michael Knowles did. No, was it Michael Knowles? No, the other guy. Matt Walsh, which is what Matt Walsh did. This instead is called What a Woman Is. So this is an answer to what a woman is. I haven't seen it. He's a Catholic and it's a Catholic film. And he went on Avoiding Babylon to talk about this. There is an irony, though, which is quite amusing, isn't it? Where can you see it, Mark?
Well, straight away, this was really funny because Katherine sent me the video and I watched it while I was driving around last night, or didn't watch it, I listened to it. And the first thing that struck me, so like you have to put it in, the basically the Avoiding Babylon position on this is that Tim Gordon came up with this idea that the root of all evil is feminism, basically, which we are on board. We're, pretty much on board with that. but like that, so they have attacked people like Lila Rose and stuff like that because they don't take their husband's name. They're girl bossing. They're telling boys what they should be thinking, telling men what they should. Right. So this is all about the woman going under the aegis of the man. And but in all, like there's a lot of this I disagree with, and that's because the mission of the man has to be the right mission. It has to be Christ's mission. And the context of Ephesians 5, which they sort of base all this in, is that it's mutual sacrifice. That's what a marriage is. So there's a lot of things that I find quite discordant in the way that they articulate some of this stuff. Now, the massive, massive eye-watering irony is that the only place that Tim could get this released is on girl boss Candice Owens' TV channel, a woman who doesn't take her husband's name and who spends all her time telling men what they should be doing. So, I mean, I don't know, they didn't refer to that at all during the whole podcast, but come on, Anthony. What was it? Was all a bit of a love in there, and I thought someone would have pointed it out.
Yeah, I did. What I sent you wasn't the film itself. It was this interview with Tim Gordon. I think is it Mike Pantill who created the film, and so they were talking to
today, didn't it? The film, I think.
Yeah, they were talking to our friends at Avoiding Babylon about it. So you can pick it up today, and I'm sure it's well worth watching. And I intend to pick it up and watch it. And I don't disagree at all with the fact that, like I've just said, the hierarchy has crumbled. Everything's out of order. We need a return to right order. I shouldn't be doing this. You don't have to tell me. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I don't even think Mark should be doing this, really. In an ideal world,
we've always said that.
We've always said that. Yeah. So this is not a defense of.
If you want me to stop doing it, just do your job properly. That's all. And then there'll be no need for us to do it.
Yeah. So I have no issue at all with the idea and behind it. And I think Tim Gordon's is right in calling men to leadership. That's absolutely right. Men have absolved, have reneged. What's the right word? They've given up, relinquished. They've relinquished their proper authority under pressure, maybe from feminism. That's quite true. And I think that's only been catastrophic. But in calling men to leadership, the message needs to be added that leadership is service. And I think that's something that's slightly missing. And I'm sure it's brought out more in the film, and I look forward to watching it. But in this interview, especially, I think it wasn't fully articulated. So do you want to draw a little bit up on that?
I would never hang out with or want to spend time with a guy who is a POS if he steps out on his wife. But here's something that the church needs to start teaching that binds.
This was one of the things that we said. There's so much jargon in this, isn't there? All different acronyms and, it's all, I don't know, I thought it was a bit, it's
very American.
It's childish, all this I work out in the gym and all, you can't be a good person if you're fat or if if you don't work out or if give me a break. And Anthony knows better than that because he works on the tools, and people who work on the tools are real. So
yeah, I think it's
posturing.
There's a lot of homey and that, and it's their audience. And again, I think Tim Gordon has a lot of really good stuff to say, and that's just his style. Fair enough. People have their own style. But what made me laugh at the beginning, I don't think we've got the clip here, is Tim Gordon starts by giving an account of his trip to Disney World, where him and his wife and his family were there, and there were loads of fat women drinking cola. And we're meant to be laughing at the fat women drinking cola and saying, "Isn't it awful?" Which it isn't good, right? But I was busy thinking, what are you doing at Disney World?
Disney, yeah.
It's like, what's that about? I wouldn't take my kids to Disney World in a million years.
Let's carry on with this clip.
Don't tell me
all of these other propositions together. In theory, a woman cannot be a good Christian woman without being a good wife. Because women were made for men, right? Men were made for God, though, right? Man is the glory of God. Woman's the glory of man. So theoretically, I don't know if I've ever seen it happen. But theoretically, a man can be a good man and not a very good husband. Now, I don't see it play out that much. All the good men I know are either priests or good husbands. But theoretically, the telos of life, the mission is the husband's, and the wife is literally just his supporting character. The main.
I mean, this was horrendous to me. I just thought it was horrible.
Well, tell us about that then. What's your perspective?
Well,
bring it down and tell us what you think.
Well, I think that like the idea that men can theoretically be good Christians without being good husbands, it's fundamentally undermines the Catholic understanding of what marriage is, because the church teaches that marriage is a sacramental vocation which is ordained for mutual sanctification. And like I said, they base all this on Ephesians 5, and in 25 to 28, St. Paul commands husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So that's like what he's doing there is making sacrificial love essential. Yeah, it's not optional, but it's essential to the husband's role. And obviously that the first thing, this is all about Christ, and it mirrors Christ's self-emptying for the church's holiness. So to suggest that a man could excel in virtue while neglecting that duty, it fragments the the whole integrated nature of Christian life is fragmented by it. Like where marriage is not a mere accessory, but a path to heaven that demands fidelity. Leaders, like, the whole idea of the male leadership, or, like that you're talking about, it has to be through a total self-gift. That's fundamental. It has to be through service. And I think, like, obviously that's emphasized in Familiaris Consortio from Pope St. John Paul II, where he says that spouses are called to grow continually in their communion through day-to-day fidelity. And I think that, the way that Tim's theoretical loophole, it's just completely impractical, which he does admit, but it's also, I think you can easily see that it's theologically flawed, because it risks excusing, like, this is the problem, isn't it, Katherine? It risks excusing male irresponsibility. And as a result of that, a lot of this rhetoric that we're seeing now, that we're talking about, in this video, it perpetuates the very cultural disorders. And this is what really worries me about it, is that it really does have a danger of perpetuating those cultural disorders that we're decrying here. Like that, you can tell what true masculine goodness is like, especially in marriage, because it's inseparable from excellence, spousal excellence, fostering family unity, and it reflects the Trinitarian love that binds us to God. And if it hasn't got that, it's inauthentic. And that's what I kind of feel when I hear that sort of chat.
Where's your pink
you
hat,
kind of
Mark?
agree with me, don't you? Huh?
No, you're a simp. Where's it?
No, yeah,
you going on a woman's march, Mark? I'm not sure I even know what a simp is, but I hear it used very often.
Yeah.
No, I think that's lovely, but I think we have to be careful, because like, there's a danger of just being against, we're against the church, men against women. We've had enough of you women. We've had enough of the corrupt bishops. We've had enough of this, and we're so angry about it. And I think it can turn us in on ourselves. It's like that dialectic again, isn't it? It's just circular, and you just go
Hegelian.
back in.
Yeah.
And it's Hegelian. And so like I began saying, I don't have much to comment on this, other than I think any film or any argument that returns to the beautiful order given by God is right, is good. But I think if we play to anything that's pat on the back, fat idiots, or stupid losers, or homo men or wimps, or you've got it. It can start to. I think especially it can start to draw young men lopsided. C.S. Lewis warns us about this being lopsided. The enemy doesn't care as long as you take a position. So contrary to what Piers said about being extremist, actually holding the centre, holding to the truth of our faith is the only way to avoid extremism. It's the only way to avoid being lopsided.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. I mean, it's all, thank you for that. And if you're still with us, guys, thank you for sticking with us for over an hour as we fought our way through that and unpacked it. Like we say, it is this is hopefully a conversation that's evolving. It's not, we're going to talk to Anthony and Rob, and we've got a meeting already booked with them. So this will be something that we hopefully we're wrestling with it, because it's a new phenomenon. This Groypers thing and all of that is a new phenomenon, and it's interesting to see the way that it's appealing to young people. And it's interesting talking to our children. Like I've got 3 sons in their 20s, and it's interesting to hear how they are responding to this. And there is something attractive in it, in terms of the fact that it's not, it's a reaction to the, the miserable sort of just downbeat, vanilla sort of Catholicism that is so prevalent and espoused most of the time by the bishops. This is something that's actually working in the community and sort of forming them and giving them a direction of travel. And I think that that's what they're responding to. Now, we all know that authentic Catholicism really does do that, but somewhere along the line we seem to have lost our way and our ability to do that, and our mission and our purpose. And so we need a good wake up, and maybe this is what this is. Yeah,
it has to be muscular and authentic, or else you are going to lose people to podcasters. For all their talk of I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, lose yourself to us anytime, guys. But we're, it's only worth listening to what we're saying, in as far as we're pointing to the church, and as far as we're saying the church has the answers. What are the things we need to avoid? What are the dangers? The sin, the flesh, and the devil. What do we need to do? Repent and believe in the gospel. Place ourselves under Christ. Worship in the way he instructed us to. Go under the mantle of Our Lady. Pray. Avail yourself of the sacraments. That's the answer. We can't be, and also do buy our mug that we've got coming out now.
She's winding you up.
Yeah, I am. Anyway, we haven't got any mugs, apart from these 2. Right. Anyway, we'll leave it there. As always, we are unscripted. No complaints. No writing in complaining, because we're all human. And if we've said something that you think, I don't know, I wouldn't have put it like that. Well, maybe you would have done if you had a camera in your face and you just had no time and you were
join in the conversation. Anyway,
join the conversation in a productive way. If you disagree with us, fine, but say why you disagree, and hopefully we can continue that in conversation with you. As always, visit our website, catholicunscripted.com, to see some of our writings there and videos, and that's where you can keep up with all our work. But for now, thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, and we'll see you soon.
God bless.